Welcome to my review for the 1981 film Road Games, directed by William Franklin and starring Stacey Keach and Jamie Lee Curtis. Stacey Keach is a bloke, by the way, if you've never heard of him before. I've never heard of the director William Franklin, but apparently he went on to do Psycho 2, which I have seen. It's a very, very good sequel as sequels go. But I don't mind admitting that the main reason for me coming to this film was Jamie Lee. I've been on a hell of a run with her recently, discovering Prom Night and Terror Train for the first time. So I thought to myself, well, why not just keep this streak going? What's next on the filmography? A film called Road Games. Great, I'm going to get it. And such is my confidence in any Jamie Lee product at the moment. I literally went out and bought a really expensive Blu-ray set for this, even though I've never seen the film before. That's where this poster comes from, and I'll actually unbox the rest of that at the end of this review because it is a really nice set. Now, the eagle-eyed among you may have noticed that I put thriller film review on the thumbnail instead of horror film review, because about halfway through this film, it did sort of occur to me that it felt more like a thriller than a horror, so I checked on Wikipedia and sure enough, it is described as a thriller, but I don't mind crossing the borders into other genres from time to time. I don't just like horror, and I have done a thriller review before, actually, way back in episode 2. I did Christopher Nolan's Tenet. Now, I'm going to try and not give spoilers today, or not too many of them anyway, because I could imagine that anybody watching this is probably more likely to have not seen Road Games than seen it, because I don't think it's a very famous film. I'd certainly never heard of it until a couple of weeks ago. The plot is about a trucker called Pat Quid. He sounds like a Harry Enfield character, but he's actually an ex-soldier who he's not married, he's about 40, and he aimlessly just drives trucks around Australia, not really knowing what to do with the rest of his life. And at the start of this film, he's just setting off on a trip from Melbourne to Perth to deliver some meat when he notices some shady goings on between a prostitute and this weird looking guy. And he doesn't think too much of it at first, but as he gets on his journey, he keeps coming across this same guy, and eventually he realizes that he could be in the presence of a psycho, and he seems to be going in the same direction as he is, towards Perth. And also in the mix is Jamie Lee as Hitchhiker. So this is very much a film which takes place out on a deserty highway and in and around motels and service stations. I'd say it's a cross between The Hitcher, Steven Spielberg's Duel, and a little bit of Wolf Creek thrown in there as well. The character of Pat Quid is extremely likeable. I was right behind him from the very first scene. I desperately wanted this story to have a happy ending. He's not one of these ex-army guys who can call upon special skills like a Casey Ryback or a Brian Mills. He actually seems quite afraid of the prospect of a physical confrontation with the killer. Anytime he has to get out of his truck, he likes to have his dog lead in one hand and a big blunt weapon high up in the other. It's very sweet, the relationship between him and his dog, or it could be a dingo. We're never quite sure throughout the film whether it's a dog or a dingo, but if it is a dingo, it does look awfully like a dog. I'm a big dog lover in real life. I've got a dog, so anytime you show me a well-established relationship between a man and a dog on screen, it does tend to touch me right here. He's a very good actor, Stacey Keach. He has to spend a lot of time during this movie talking to himself in the front of his truck or talking to his dog, but he pulls it off extremely well. I've seen him in a few things before. He did a film called Bouncing of the Cannibal God. As cannibal horror films go, that's not bad, albeit a little bit sleazy. And he also went on to be in Escape from LA, which doesn't have a great reputation as a sequel to Escape from New York, but it's been a while since I've seen it. I think I need to revisit that one. Jamie Lee Curtis plays a very similar role to the one she plays in The Fog. So she's a hitchhiker, and she also just happens to be very attracted to middle-aged men. This is probably the least amount of screen time she'd had of any of the films she'd done up to this point. But I think the big draw for her in taking this role would have been the fact that it was a chance to do something other than horror. And also it was an international film. She was only 22, 23 years old when she did this, so it was a good chance for her to go to Australia, have a good experience. As for the killer, I'm not going to give too much away. You should discover him for yourself. The script does a good job of keeping him as mysterious as possible for as long as possible. I'll give you just a couple of tidbits, which is by pointing you towards the poster again. He likes to wear these driving gloves throughout the film, and he tends to kill people with a guitar wire. That's his MO, but I'm not giving you anything else. You've got to watch the movie. That's just about it in terms of the main characters. There are a number of unnamed extras who we see more than once because maybe Pat passes them on the freeway, but later on they pass Pat, or vice versa. So there's this one guy who's travelling with about 100 footballs and basketballs in the back of his car. We see him at least twice. I don't know what that's all about, though. There's another guy who's towing a yacht, and the second time we see him, the yacht gets smashed up during a chase, and when Pat looks behind, he can see that this guy has got out of his car and started jumping up and down on the wreckage of his yacht. It's a real kind of Caddyshack moment, but it's very, very funny. The scenery in the film is absolutely brilliant. I mean, that road that goes from Melbourne to Perth is absolutely breathtaking. If you start off on the Melbourne side, then you're travelling with the desert on your right, the ocean on your left, and if the evidence in this film is to be believed, then the road travels quite close to the coast in a number of spots, and the cinematographer takes full advantage because there are a number of really cool shots that look like they've been taken from a helicopter out on the ocean, looking back over the cliff towards the road where it is next to the desert. I think anytime you set a film in Australia, you're going to score some points for visuals, even if the rest of the film is rubbish. But this film is far from rubbish. The plot is completely impossible to predict. I mean, don't even bother trying to guess what's going to happen from act to act. It's quite a slow burn. It comes in at just over 100 minutes, but that feels appropriate given the length of journey that Pat Quid is having to go on. It feels like we should feel emotionally drained by the end of the film, just like Pat is. I mean, it's 1,600 miles from Melbourne to Perth. Supposedly, it would take you 35 hours at top speed, driving without a break to cover that ground. According to the production notes on Wikipedia, Quentin Tarantino apparently considers this one of his favourite films, which is definitely high praise. On a related subject, there's a scene about half an hour in, I'd say, where Pat's on the telephone at a rest stop, and the camera starts to pan away from Pat around the room, taking in all the expressions of the diners and waitresses as they're watching Pat make this call. And we do a full 360-degree turn right around to where Pat is, but we do this extremely slowly. And I thought to myself, didn't Tarantino do this exact same shot in his film Death Proof? There was a scene where all the girl characters were sat at a table, and he did this 360-degree turn really slowly, and then you could see stuntman Mike halfway round. Presumably he got the idea for that shot from this movie, although he would have to confirm it. I do have a couple of negatives about the film. Firstly, before Pat picks up Pamela, that's the Jamie Lee character, he picks up this other hitchhiker, this middle-aged woman, and she is so annoying. I was thinking to myself, please get her out of the movie as quickly as possible. Thankfully she does leave before some serious negative points were accrued. And also, about halfway through the film, I'd say this time, there's this real high-tension scene at night which had me like this. And I was wondering what was going to happen, and suddenly we cut to the next day, and I'm thinking, what? The scene wasn't even finished. There was like so much more to milk from that scene. So that is a really weird thing. If you've seen the movie, you probably know what scene I'm on about. But yeah, it was just kind of weird. It's still a great scene when I look back on it, but it could have been so much better. Now, I did promise earlier that I would show off my Blu-ray set for this in closer detail, so I'm going to do that. Now, that poster, by the way, has a flip side with another picture on it, but I've gone with the version that mirrors the front of the Blu-ray. It's a limited edition, only 5,000 copies made. This is number 3038. It's got an amazing booklet inside. It's got a picture of Jamie Lee on the front, and I think that might be the director on the back. It's extremely thick, this. I mean, it's a good read. It's got like interviews with the cast and the director, and it's got essays in it. It's absolutely fantastic. The actual Blu-ray has got an astonishing amount of features. I mean, you won't be able to read the text from there, but you can see how thick it is. That is just a list of all the features. There's like 3 audio commentaries, a stack of documentaries. I think if I watched all that stuff, I would be sick of this movie. So I might take in a commentary, but I think that'll be about it. Maybe a documentary, if I like the look of one. So yeah, this set makes me want to go out and buy more releases that are just like this. Although obviously that would be very expensive, so it's just something I like to do here and there when I can afford it. Right, let's get to the bag of terror and find out what sort of score we've got for road games. We've got 1, 2, 3 and a half. 3.5 bloody axes out of 5. This is a very good film. I was close to giving it 4 bloody axes. I sort of ummed and ahed. But if you fancy a good, thrilling film set on an Australian highway, lots of murder and intrigue, starring some great actors, Stacey Keach, Jamie Lee Curtis, then give this a shot. Now, I'll finish off by saying I hope you had a very happy Christmas, and I hope you have a very good New Year, although I'm still hoping to get one more review out before then, so I'm not going to start singing Old Lands Syne or whatever it's called just yet. Cheerio for now. Bye-bye.